Grant waited until the wine was poured and the guests were laughing before he said it. He tipped his chair back, swirled his glass, and told the whole table, "Mom doesn't pay for anything here. She lives on the house." He smiled when he said it, the way you smile at a joke everyone is supposed to find charming. Sloane laughed too, a soft little laugh into her napkin. My granddaughter Mara stopped chewing and looked at me. The candle between us was burning crooked, dripping wax onto the good tablecloth. And I remember thinking that nobody had noticed except me. I did not raise my voice. I did not put down my glass too hard. I set my fork against the rim of my plate, folded my napkin into a neat square, and excused myself to take a call I had not yet received. In the hallway, away from the warm light of that table, I dialed a number I had known by heart for 30 years. Frances picked up on the second ring. "It's Vivian," I said. "I think we should pull the file." There was a pause, and then she said the thing I needed to hear. "It's still recorded, Viv. It never went anywhere." What Grant did not know, smiling at the head of his table, was that the house he was bragging about was not entirely his. And by the end of that month, the comfortable story he had been telling everyone was going to come apart at the seams. If you have ever sat quietly while someone you raised rewrote your worth in front of strangers, you already know why I am telling you this. Before I go on, let me know where you are listening from tonight and what the hour is for you. Drop it in the comments. It helps to know someone out there is on the other end of the line. My name is Vivian Hale. I am 71 years old, and for 34 of those years, I worked behind a counter most people walk past without a glance, in the records division of a county recorder's office near Beaufort, South Carolina. I examined deeds. I checked legal descriptions, traced chains of title, and caught the small mistakes that turn into very large problems decades later. It is not glamorous work, but I will tell you something I learned in that office that took me half my life to truly understand. A thing that is written down and filed properly outlives every promise made out loud. My husband Raymond knew that long before I did. He was a carpenter and then a contractor, the kind of man who built half the porches in our town and could tell you the year a house was framed just by looking at the joists. Raymond did not trust handshakes. "A handshake fades by morning," he used to say, sanding a board down to nothing while he talked. A recorded paper is still sitting in that courthouse when your grandchildren are old. For 41 years, we built a quiet life on that principle. We raised one son, Grant, in a small cedar-shingled cottage 2 streets back from the water, and we believed, the way parents do, that we were doing it right. Grant was bright and restless, even as a boy. He wanted bigger than the cottage. We were proud of that hunger, so we fed it. When he wanted to go into real estate, Raymond co-signed his first lease. When Grant opened a restaurant on the waterfront at 34, we put in money we called an investment and never expected back. The restaurant closed in under 2 years and left him with debt he was ashamed of, and we helped him through that too, quietly, the way you do for your own. Raymond said something to me once while we did the dishes after one of those rescues. "We keep catching him before he lands," he said. "One day he is going to forget the ground was ever hard." I thought he was just tired. I know better now. Raymond died 3 years ago, in March, on an ordinary Thursday morning. A stroke, fast and merciless, between his first cup of coffee and his second. One moment he was reading the paper and complaining about the bridge construction downtown, and the next he was gone, and the cottage that had always felt full went silent in a way I did not have words for. I kept his coffee mug on the windowsill for a month because washing it felt like erasing him. Grief does strange things to a person. It makes you smaller and softer, and it makes you easy to move. That is when Grant began to call. Every few days at first, then every day. He was worried about me alone in the cottage, he said. The yard was too much. The roof would need work. A widow my age should not be climbing a ladder to clean gutters. He drove down from Mount Pleasant and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Raymond had taught him fractions, and he laid it all out gently. Sell the cottage. Move in with him and Sloane and the children. There was a guest suite on the ground floor. Mara and Theo would grow up with their grandmother down the hall. It sounded like love. I want to be fair to him. Even now, I think part of it was. So I sold the cottage. And here's the part that matters. The part Grant forgot. The house he and Sloane wanted was beyond their reach on their own. And the proceeds from my cottage, $214,000, became the down payment that closed the deal. Grant called it a gift. He said it warmly, with his arm around my shoulders at the closing. But I had spent 34 years on the other side of that counter, and I did not give $214,000 to anyone, not even my son, on a warm word at a closing table. I told Francis, who had retired into private practice as a real estate attorney, to paper it properly. We drew it up as a loan, secured by a deed of trust against the Mount Pleasant house, a recorded second lien in my name. Grant signed it without reading it, the way he signed everything, eager to get to the celebration. Then he filed it away in a drawer of his mind labeled Mom's Gift, and forgot it had ever been written. I did not forget. I never forget a recorded instrument. It is the one thing I am very good at. For a while, living there was sweet. Mara, who was 10 then, took to curling up beside me after supper to practice the harder words out loud. Theo lined his toy cars up on my floor and narrated races that never ended. The first months felt almost like family, but families shift slowly, the way a house settles, and you do not hear the beams move until something cracks. The shift began over something as small as a sandwich. I made grilled cheese for the children after school one afternoon, and Sloane came in, watched me for a moment, and said lightly that she preferred to handle the meals, that she liked to keep track of what was being used. I apologized and stepped back. A few weeks later, she mentioned that running the dryer in the afternoon cost more, so I should wait until evening. Small corrections, each one reasonable on its own. But I noticed that every adjustment moved me a little further from the center of the house and a little closer to the edge of it. I caught myself checking with Sloane before doing the ordinary things a grown woman should never have to ask about. Grant stopped seeing me at all, in the way that busy people stop seeing the furniture. He would glance up from his screen long enough to ask whether I was settling in fine. I would tell him I was, and the conversation closed there before it started. I tried to earn my place. I folded laundry and packed the children's bags and ran errands no one asked me to run. Sloane thanked me the way you thank a neighbor, politely and from a distance. And then came the night I went downstairs for a glass of water and heard them in the kitchen, low voices, and my own name. She's not cheap to keep, Sloane was saying. Groceries, the extra room, the water. And Grant, my son, the boy who cried into my collar over a scraped knee, sighed and said, I know, we'll figure it out. I went back upstairs without my water. I lay awake a long time. Something in me had gone very still and very clear. The comments came more often after that, dressed up as jokes. Grandparents eat more than teenagers, Grant said once, and everyone laughed. I laughed too, because what else do you do at your own table? But under the laughter, a sentence was forming, and 3 weeks later, in front of dinner guests, he finally said it out loud. I lived there on charity. I ate for free. The thing that finally turned doubt into certainty was not a cruel word. It was a piece of paper, which is fitting, because paper has always been the language I speak best. A week before that dinner, I had gone looking for the property tax notice, which had stopped appearing in my hands the way my mail had a habit of doing in that house. I found it on Grant's desk, opened, in a folder, and underneath it was something else. A printout from a mortgage lender, a refinance estimate for the Mount Pleasant house. I am trained to read documents quickly, and I read that one standing up, in the cold light of his office, before I had decided whether I had the right to. The refinance assumed the house was held free and clear except for the first mortgage. There was no mention of my lien. None. In the margin, in Sloane's handwriting, was a note that I read 3 times to be sure I understood it. By V. A small condo. Call it square. Call it square. As if my deed of trust did not exist. As if $214,000 were a thing they could erase by deciding to forget it, the way they had erased everything else I brought into that house. They were planning to refinance, pull cash out, and quietly fold me into a small condo somewhere, treating a recorded, secured, enforceable note as if it were a favor they could repay at their own convenience. They did not know that I had read the document. They did not know that I, of all people, knew exactly what a recorded lien can and cannot be made to disappear. I put the folder back exactly as I found it. My hands were steady. I went to my room, opened Raymond's fireproof box, and took out the deed of trust, with the county recorder's stamp pressed into the corner. The ink faded, but the seal unmistakable. I sat with it on my knees for a long while. Then I made the call you already heard me make. Here is the thing about a refinance. You cannot pull cash out of a house, or sell it, or do much of anything with it, while there is a recorded lien sitting on the title that has not been satisfied. Any title examiner in the county would find my deed of trust in 20 minutes, because finding exactly that kind of thing had been my job for 34 years. Grant's plan did not have a hole in it. Grant's plan had me in it, and he had simply forgotten. If you want to know how a quiet woman takes back what is hers, stay with me. And if these stories matter to you, subscribe before you go, because what happened next is the part I have replayed 100 times. I did not confront him. That was the old way. The loud way, the way that ends in tears and changes nothing. Instead, I did what I do best. I prepared. Francis pulled the recorded instrument and confirmed every detail. The lien was valid, properly filed, never released, never satisfied, accruing exactly the modest interest we had written into it. By her calculation, Grant and Sloan owed the principal plus a little over $31,000 in accumulated interest. And not $1 of it could be wished away. We drew up 2 things. The first was a formal payoff demand, the document a lender or a buyer would require before any refinance or sale could close. The second was a letter, plain and short, stating that I intended to enforce my interest unless it was satisfied in full. Francis asked me, gently, whether I truly wanted to send them. "He's still your son," she said. "He told a room full of strangers that I eat for free," I said. "I just want the room to know the truth." In the days before the dinner, I let nothing show. I folded the laundry. I read with Mara. When Grant mentioned casually that the refinance paperwork was moving along and they hoped to have things settled by spring, I nodded and said that sounded sensible. He took my calm for ignorance, the way he always had, and he relaxed into it, and he told me more than he should have. The lender wanted to close in 3 weeks. The appraisal had come back high. Everything was on track. He had no idea he was describing a train to a woman holding the only switch on the line. I had 1 test left for him, 1 chance I wanted to give him before the paper did the talking. The night before the dinner party, I knocked on his office door and asked him, plainly, whether he still remembered where the down payment for the house had come from. He looked up, mildly annoyed at the interruption. "Your cottage money," he said. "The gift." "Why?" I asked whether he thought of it as a gift or as something he owed. He laughed, not unkindly, and said, "Mom, that was years ago. It's all just the house now. It's all one thing." Then he turned back to his screen. He had been given the chance to remember, and he had chosen to forget on purpose. I closed the door softly. I felt, more than anything, a strange and steady calm, the kind that comes when the last question has finally been answered. The dinner was meant to be a celebration. Grant and Sloan had finished a renovation on the front of the house and invited friends to see it. The same friends who had heard him say I lived there on charity. 14 people by my count, around a long table dressed in linen and candlelight. Grant was at the head of it, glowing, telling the story of the house, how he had found it, how he had closed it, how he had built it all into what it was. He did not mention the cottage. He did not mention me, except to gesture and say his mother lived with them now. Wasn't that nice? Heads turned to me kindly, the way they turned to a charity. That was when the doorbell rang. I had told Frances 8 o'clock, and Frances has never been late in her life. Grant answered it himself, expecting a neighbor. Instead, a composed woman in a gray coat introduced herself as his mother's attorney and asked politely whether this was a good time to deliver a recorded matter concerning the property. The table went quiet the way a table does when the word attorney lands in a room. Grant laughed, uncertain. "There's some mistake," he said. Frances opened her folder and laid a single page on the linen in front of him. The deed of trust, county stamp in the corner, his own signature at the bottom. I watched my son read his own name. I watched him understand it. He looked up at me, and for the first time in 3 years, he saw me. Really saw me. The woman who had examined deeds for 34 years, sitting quietly at his beautiful table. "This is recorded," he said, and it was not a question. "It has been recorded since the day you bought this house," I said. "It is the reason you could buy this house." Sloane reached for the paper, her designer's eye scanning it for a flaw, and found none, because there was none. Frances explained it plainly to the silent room, the way an attorney does. No cruelty in it, only facts. There was a valid recorded lien against the property in the amount of $214,000 plus interest. No refinance could close over it. No sale could close over it. The money was not a gift. It was a loan, secured by the very floor under their feet. And it was due. 14 guests looked at their plates. The candles kept burning, crooked, the way they had the night he called me free. Grant tried, the way people do. He said we could discuss this privately. He said I was embarrassing him. He said finally, his voice cracking, "Mom, why are you doing this here?" And I gave him the only answer that was true. "Because here is where you said it. You told these people I cost you nothing. I wanted them to know exactly what I am worth." I did not shout. I did not stay to watch him flounder for the rest of the evening. I thanked the guests for their company, took my coat, and walked out into the cool spring night with Frances, and for the first time in 3 years, the air did not feel borrowed. 8 months later, I live in a cottage again, 2 streets back from the water, not so different from the one Raymond and I built our life in. Grant and Sloane could not refinance, and they could not sell until they satisfied the lien, which meant the comfortable plan to fold me away into a small condo was the one thing that became impossible. They paid it. It took a hard year and the sale of Sloane's second car and a kind of honesty Grant had avoided his whole life. But they paid every dollar, with interest, because a recorded paper does not care how charming you are at the head of a table. Grant and I are not what we were. I do not think we will ever be. He has called a few times, and we have spoken, carefully, like 2 people learning a new language. The door is open, but it opens on my terms now, in daylight, with the truth on the table between us. Some bridges you do not rush to rebuild. Some you let stand as they are, half-burned, a reminder of how the fire started. The one good thing I carried out of that house was Mara. She is 12 now, and she comes to my cottage on Saturdays, and I have started a small account in her name. The kind of thing that will be hers free and clear, recorded, no one able to call it a gift and take it back. She asked me once why I keep so many papers in a fireproof box. I told her what Raymond told me, all those years ago, sanding a board down to nothing. A handshake fades by morning. A recorded paper is still sitting in that courthouse when your grandchildren are old. If there is one thing I hope you take from this, it is that silence is not the same as peace, and patience is not the same as weakness. The people who decide you are worth nothing are usually the ones who never bothered to check what was written down. Be kind, be patient, but keep your papers, keep your dignity. And when someone tells a room full of strangers that you cost them nothing, you are allowed to show them the receipt. Have you ever had to remind someone exactly what you were worth? Tell me about it in the comments. Let me know what corner of the world you are in tonight and how late it has gotten there. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and stay with me, because there is always another one, and quiet people have the longest memories of all. Thank you for listening.